Russia, Ukraine, what's going on the battlefield. We talked about how it ties back to 2016 and the documents now being released on Russiagate by DNI Tulsi Gabbard. And by the way, Colonel McGregor, DNI Gabbard is another one, like Secretary Kennedy and many others, who came into the admin really calling for the United States to stop the Ukraine war as soon as possible, end our support for it. Yet we seem to be still bogged down in this quagmire. And all I can see on the battlefront, think about what happened just over the past few days. President Trump calls for 10 days of a deadline, and what happens that evening? Kiev gets hit with 300 drones and dozens of missiles immediately after. So it seems that the Russians are not listening to Trump.
No, Jack, you're right. They aren't. And people shouldn't mistake what's going on as some sort of reaction to anything that President Trump says or does. The Russians are pursuing their own offensive operation designed to terminate the war on their terms. That's what you're seeing. That will involve ultimately Russian intervention directly into Kiev with troops, as well as down to Odessa. The sad part is that we have lied so often. You can go all the way back before 2014. You can go back to the 90s. All the things that we said and all the things we did, the sort of systematic abandoning of arms control arrangements, when there was no real urgent reason to abandon any of them. All of these things leading up to the Minsk Accords, which were just, myths. No one ever intended to fulfill any of the obligations that was designed to buy time to build up Ukraine. All of this kind of business has happened. The discovery of all the biolabs in Ukraine, where they were conducting genetic experiments designed to kill Slavs. I mean, good Lord, this sort of thing is worse than in some of the Soviet and Nazi stuff. So the Russians don't believe us, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And I don't know what President Trump thinks any more sanctions will do. The sanctions haven't held Russia back. Russia's doing a land office business. It's now the fourth largest economy in the world. That's a pretty heady achievement in the middle of a war. So I don't know what President Trump is doing. Now, I have heard...
I actually saw Russia just cut their interest rates yesterday, too.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that I'm hearing foolish statements inside the Beltway from Bill. Well, it's time for us to use Tomahawk missiles. Let me tell you something. If you continue these long-range strikes, the Russians have missile supremacy. They'll flatten whatever they need to in Eastern Europe, and we should not exclude the possibility that we are immune. This age of immunity because we sit between two oceans is over. We've got to start behaving responsibly towards others. We haven't been doing that. And if you press this far enough, you're going to end up with exactly what Dmitry Trenin, the former Russian senior officer in Moscow who worked for the Carnegie Endowment, he explains that Russia is now preparing for war. And they're serious, and they know how to do it. They have the huge scientific industrial base with military manufacturing. We don't have that capacity. And they're ready to fight. They have a nation that's ready to fight. They have a cohesive society. Jack, somebody said to me, we should prepare to go and take back Eastern Ukraine. You know what I said? I think we should take back Los Angeles. I wouldn't worry about Eastern Ukraine. And I think that's our great vulnerability right now. We are not a cohesive society. We've got serious problems here. Anybody who watched the Los Angeles riots and all these foreign flags, Mexican, El Salvadoran, whatever, the statements, shooting at ICE officers and so forth. This is outrageous. That's where we should be focused. And that, too, was something that President Trump promised he was going to address. Hasn't happened.
Well, I think that's also what you say. One of the big forces that drove President Trump and the MAGA movement to political success in all of these campaigns was the idea that we would stop focusing on these far off conflicts and start focusing on the problems at home. I'm written up in Politico right now for talking about how what we essentially have within the United States, you can call them fifth columns, but what they really are mini nations, these mini ethnic enclaves that refer to themselves as part of Mexico or part of Somalia or wherever, part of Palestine, wherever it might be, they have affinity and allegiance clearly towards the home country, and they view us as a sort of host for their economic extraction, but they bear no allegiance. And some of them have citizenship, some of them have visas, but that's not the point, is they view themselves as separate from America.
You're 100% on target, Jack. And that's why when I was working for President Trump, and I was asked point blank in front of then Secretary of Defense Esper and his sidekick, I guess it was O'Brien, what is the existential threat to the United States today? What's the greatest existential threat? I said, it's not China, it's not Russia. It's what's happening in the Caribbean basin in Mexico and their infiltration into the United States and the destruction of our society. Well, the other two were absolutely shocked, couldn't believe it. And that was the last thing we discussed. President Trump nodded and then thanked me, and that ended the discussion that went on for about 45, 50 minutes. It was supposed to be only 10 or 15. But the bottom line is that he knows that. But, he is in the hands of people that elected him and funded him. And he's listening to them instead of listening to his own inner voice. He needs to listen to his own inner voice. And that would tell him we need to get all these ground forces back from Europe, get them back to the United States, ultimately get them out of Japan and Korea. We're going to need all of it here in the United States to deal with exactly what you described, Jack. You're 100% right.
The greatest foreign threat is already here. It's already here within our own nations, within our own cities, within our own towns, in many cases